They're arguing about bread, but Jesus is exposing unbelief. Mark 8:14 to 21 isn't about lunch. It's about spiritual sight. And this moment sets the stage for everything that happens next. This is part 52. Let's dig into verse 14 from the ESV. Now they had forgotten to bring bread, and they had only one loaf with them in the boat. When did this happen? Right after the Pharisees demanded that Jesus show them a miracle to prove himself to them, and Jesus refused and left in a boat with his disciples. And what is the problem? There are at least 13 men, and they only have one loaf of bread with them. Hold that thought, and let's move on to verse 15. And he cautioned them, saying, "Watch out! Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." The verse says, he cautioned them. But this is important. The Greek word literally says, he gave them orders, or he instructed them. Why does this matter? Because Jesus isn't giving them advice. The Master is instructing his disciples, and if they are genuinely disciples, they are obligated to heed those instructions. He gave them two commands: watch out and beware. Both of these terms are eyesight-based. See what's going on and be on the lookout. It sounds as though there's a danger for them to avoid. What is the danger? The leaven or yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod Antipas. How does yeast work to leaven bread? It infiltrates the dough and eats the sugars, producing gases that cause the dough to rise and form pockets in the bread. Even a little yeast can have a profound effect on the dough because it gets in there and grows. Within Judaism, there's a feast of unleavened bread associated with the Passover, and one of the practices of preparation is to scour, scrub, and even burn the tables, pots, and implements with fire, to be certain that all the yeast in the kitchen is gone. So Jesus' disciples, all Jewish, would understand that yeast can be pernicious. But Jesus isn't talking about actual yeast. He's referring to the pernicious influence of the Pharisees and of Herod Antipas. Why did he name them in particular? The Pharisees are the ultra-religious, and Herod Antipas is a secular, sensualist, more focused on politics than God. Both the Pharisees and Herod have heard about Jesus and his miracles, but neither is persuaded by them. So the leaven of the Pharisees and Herod could corrupt the disciples in such a way that, despite what they had seen and heard and known about Jesus, they could find themselves faithless too. Look at verse 16. And they began discussing with one another the fact that they had no bread. How did they interpret their master's commands? They went right back to talking about their lack of bread. Why? Leaven is related to bread making, and it's what they were talking about before Jesus spoke to them. But, as Jesus is about to explain to them, their concern about the lack of bread is ridiculous, considering recent events. Look at verses 17 and 18. And Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why are you discussing the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember?" He asks them 5 questions. 1. Why are you talking about bread? A lack of bread should be their least concern. 2. Do you not yet perceive or understand? These words speak to the operation of the mind. Don't you guys get it? 3. Are your hearts hardened, like your ancestors who had to wander the wilderness for 40 years after the Exodus? Are you stubborn and insensitive to what's been happening before your eyes? 4. Is there something wrong with your eyesight and hearing because you've seen and heard astonishing things, and yet you're talking about a lack of bread? And 5. Don't you remember what you've seen and heard? Have you forgotten already? Remember what? Look at verses 19 and 20. When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? They said to him, 12. And the 7 for the 4,000, how many baskets full of broken pieces did you take up? And they said to him, 7. Notice that Jesus doesn't tell them. He asks them. He makes them remember and repeat what they had seen, heard, and experienced firsthand. They know for a fact that Jesus was more than sufficient for the needs of a crowd of over 5,000 Jews and another crowd of 4,000 Gentiles. They were there. They were the waiters who served the food. Isn't it foolish for them to be stressing out about a lack of bread now? Then Jesus closes with a final question. Look at verse 21. And he said to them, "Do you not yet understand?" Yet is an important word here. They've seen and heard so much. They've participated in Jesus' miracles, and when he sent them out 2 by 2, they did similar things themselves. But here they are, still worried about bread. Their own experiences, what they've seen and heard and know and feel, should tell them that bread is not a problem when they're with Jesus. So what does this have to do with the Pharisees and Herod Antipas? They also heard about Jesus, but didn't believe enough to put their faith in him. They still had their own agendas and priorities, and if the disciples don't watch out and beware, they'll become like the Pharisees and Herod, remaining oblivious to who their master really is despite everything they've seen and heard and experienced. It's not a coincidence that the next story Mark will tell us is about Jesus restoring sight to a blind man. Seeing things as they are is the core lesson of this passage. So what can we take away from this story for ourselves? Do we have eyes to see and ears to hear? Are we so focused on a perceived lack of bread in the moment that we forget about the abundance with which we've been blessed? And how aware are we of the influence of the attitudes and disbelief of others? Only a little bit of yeast works its way through the entire lump of dough. Don't miss the next video, when Jesus clears up the disciples' vision by curing a man of blindness. Thank you for watching So What Scripture. Please let your friends know about these videos.